Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ReinventED Legal Business, the Case Studies series. I have the absolute pleasure of spending this next session with Kirkman Family Law, and in particular, Fiona Kirkman. Hi, Fiona. Good to see you.
How are you?
Who is the principal of that practice, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that and also the amazing legal tech that they use in their practice, both developed by themselves and a broader range of tech as well. And we're referring, of course, there to LawSwitch and to family property. So you're going to hear all about that. The centre has been connected, I'm delighted to say, with Fiona and her business and professional partner, Tim, really since the outset, I think, Fiona. And so it's just been such a joy to see your practice grow and to flourish and to transform in many respects as well. And that's the journey that you're going to be talking about today. So we're delighted, like a parent would be delighted, I think, in a way. So just fantastic. So with that being said, and again, a huge welcome, Fiona, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us more about this fabulous thing that you do.
Thank you, Terri, and thank you to the Centre for Legal Innovation. As Terri said, you've been a supporter of our legal tech products since the beginning. I think we ran the first event with you in the early days. I think it was 2018. Up in Brisbane, when we could meet a lot more face-to-face, where we did a presentation on legal technology. And so it's been great to journey with you, and really we've developed a lot since that point. So keen to share it with you today. So as Terri said, I'm somebody who wears quite a few hats. I am an accredited specialist in family law, an accredited mediator and family dispute resolution practitioner. And I've been, I guess, in the law world for over 18 years now, and do have my own practice, Kirkman Family Law, which is quite unique in itself in that I do exclusively family mediation and collaborative practice coach work. So that's my, I guess, family law hat. In addition to that, as Terri said, I do wear the hat of co-founder of some legal tech products with my techie husband, Tim. So LawSwitch and Family Property. And so I'm CEO of Family Property and LawSwitch, and I really help bringing that legal foundation to the products, which I'll go through a bit more with you during this session. So Kirkman Family Law, as I've said, it's focused on family law resolution, mediation and collaborative practice. And I'm really focused on resolution without court. I guess that's my mandate. And I'm really passionate about three things in Kirkman Family Law and in legal tech in general, and that is dispute resolution and how to find ways to help separated couples resolve disputes more amicably and efficiently. 2, utilising legal technology to help bring about that resolution. And 3, I'm also quite big on educating the next generation of family lawyers and family mediators. And I've been involved with the College of Law in a number of respects. I'm on the board, advisory board, and I've done some teaching of the PLT students. And I love seeing the next generation. I think I've had about 30 law students / mediation students over my 5 years of running Kirkman Family Law. So I'm really big on mentoring and love education, both myself being educated, but also educating others. So a bit more about the products. LawSwitch was our first product that we developed. We saw that there was a lot of repetition in the way that law firms were doing admin in particular, and looked at ways where there's a lot of automation, there's opportunities for, a lot of repetition, there's a lot of opportunities for automation. And LawSwitch was birthed of that idea that intakes in particular could be automated through chatbots, booking pages, document and email automation. So we developed that LawSwitch for all law firms, not just family law, but all law firms. We've had some great traction. We actually won the Legal Geek competition a couple of years ago, and we're blessed with travelling overseas to the UK and Ireland and Singapore, and developed really good relationships and got good insight on how we can develop LawSwitch and also our other product, Family Property. So it's been a big journey, and yeah, we continue to offer LawSwitch to law firms to help them automate their law firm from intakes to document drafting. So that's LawSwitch. And lastly, family property. I'm really passionate, of course, about family law. And family property, we were approached by Professor Patrick Parkinson. He had the idea for family property, and he had spent a year developing a questionnaire to automate the intake of family law financial matters in particular. And seeing our work with LawSwitch, he approached us as a couple in law and technology and said, let's partner and look at how we can build out this product. So that went to market again a couple of years ago now. We launched live, and we've really been enhancing that product to a point now that we have over 100 law firms, mediators, Legal Aid New South Wales, family relationship centres, really helping from intake to an agreement in automating that admin, streamlining the family law financial process through intakes, questionnaires, document disclosure, balance sheets. So really at the heart of family property is this interactive balance sheet to model and compare proposals, and then an automated document engine. So everything from property orders to balance sheets to chronologies, etc., at a click of a button. So it's really designed to be an end-to-end system. We're also excited that we're now this year building out a parenting component. So it will be a complete end-to-end family law product at the moment for the professionals, for the lawyers and mediators. So that's a basic introduction. Terri, I don't know if you have any specific questions before we move into how I moved from traditional practice to where I am today.
It's almost kind of setting up the next bit in a way, I think, Fiona, because, and given your background, and that is, you know, what was the thing or your mindset shift that really got you thinking about transitioning from traditional practice kind of into the tech world, if you like? And the second part of that is also, how has that meant that you think about how you conceive, how you deliver your products and services differently from how you would have traditionally? So it's kind of a two-parter, and you might answer that in terms of this next part, but it, you know, kind of as the 40,000 metre view in a way as well.
Yeah, well, interesting question. My background before I started Kirkman Family Law is I had worked in 3 different firms, 4 years each, I think this 4-year each perhaps, and quite traditional firms. And as I went on in my career, I became increasingly specialised in family law. And I guess it was going up the ladder as I went, from junior lawyer to senior associate, with an aim to partnership. And that's what initially I had thought. And yeah, it was traditional practice, very much the lawyer and the PA, everyone working in the office, practice management system, everything face to face. And whilst I enjoyed it, I saw It was quite litigious, litigation focused, and I really had a heart for settlement and resolution without court. And I saw, and if you've heard in the media, there's the family law system is quite broken, and I saw that there's a number of problems with family law, and that some of these problems can be addressed with a greater focus on dispute resolution, as well as a greater focus on technology. And obviously being married to a techie, it was good with having these conversations about the problems in the legal industry and how perhaps the fintech is a lot further ahead, and how it was possibly time for the legal industry in 2018 to really get into using technology to automate what should be automated and free up the professionals to provide the value add. So to provide the legal advice, to provide the strategic advice, to go to court, to go to the mediation. It's not to replace the lawyer work or the mediation work, but really supplement and complement what we do as professionals, and therefore saving a lot of time and saving a lot of cost for the general public that often in a family separation, they're going through the most stressful situation in their life, and they want a clearer process, a focus on dispute resolution, and they don't want to be spending a lot on the admin that can be automated through technology. So that was...
Sorry, go on. I was going to say, it sounds like the tech has almost made, in many respects, not just what you do better, but actually a better client experience as well. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, and we're getting that now from our family property subscribers in particular, that they're actually using the technology as a sales point for their clients, in that this interactive balance sheet, being able to visually see who's keeping what in the asset pool, what does a 50-50 look like, what does a 60-40 look like, and then being able to get the documents, the balance sheet, the proposal, a summary of everything they've said at a click of a button for them to take away and think about that. It's really been a marketing tool in some respects for our lawyers and mediators, particularly at that initial conference, and to really involve them as well. I think a relationship with family lawyers and clients has to be that collaborative relationship where they're providing information and documents in a timely manner. The lawyers are providing the advice, and then the clients are providing instructions based on the advice given. And it really helps with that collaboration between lawyer or mediator and client. So yeah, those are things.
It also sounds like it's change the focus of where you spend your time on what I would call task-based, like information collection, versus you've now got that in front of you, and everybody's, with great transparency, has been able to see how things kind of go. And so the time or the focus is on the more complex, even the more but the greater focus on the humanity part of it, in a way, given the nature of your practice as well. Is that true?
Yeah, so humanity perspective, that's always going to be the primary role, I believe, of family lawyers and family mediators, and technology can't replace that. But the information gathering and the document gathering, those things do take a lot of time if you do it the traditional way. And that I don't think the market, the general public, now that there is these tech tools are available, is really going to allow that continue indefinitely. The ability to be able to get the financial information, get the financial documents all through a portal, and then at a click of a button make those documents accessible to the other side through a shareable link, and for those documents to be accessible, auto-indexed, all of that saves a significant amount of time, as opposed to like snail mail or email and disorganisation around that. And it's really improving, in my experience, the client experience. And that's my experience. I obviously continue to do mediation. I probably do two or three a week. And particularly now that a lot of things are done online, it's really helpful to have the ability to share the screen and for them to interact and see you put the information up and what it looks like as an overall, for example, overall property settlement split, and what are the relevant considerations on contributions, future needs, etc.
Yeah, and as you say, that kind of, in the sort of work that you do, that level of transparency has got to be a huge plus. You know, where everyone can see exactly what everyone else is seeing at the same time. And there's got to be a cost saving to that too, Fiona, right? Because as you're saying before, it would have been like loads of email exchanges or whatever the case may be. That work has now all basically been stripped out or consolidated, as the case may be.
Yeah, so it's all now in the one platform, all the information and documents, etc., available at a click of a button. And really, as you said, it's a time saving, which ultimately is a cost saving for these people that are going through a really difficult time in their life. And it frees us up as professionals. I know it's frustrating going through hundreds of, sometimes thousands of documents and putting them in a folder and indexing them, those sorts of things through platforms like Family Property are really saving the professionals. And that's not what work we want to be doing. We want to be providing the value-add legal advice and strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you go back to your slides, I just wanted to put to you one question that I've heard a few times, and I certainly have a response to this, but I'd love to hear yours. And that is that, you know, when you sit down with someone and you do the form filling exercise manually, it's an opportunity to get to know your client and you know, to kind of almost settle them into the relationship with you. If that's automated, then clearly you're not doing that. What are your thoughts about that? Because it's obviously actually a process that you have gone through yourself. What are your thoughts about that, and what have you seen in relation to that?
I think there's multiple thoughts around this, and it does depend on the individual client as well. I think we have to I definitely tailor my mediation process to the needs of the client. I don't completely strip out the human approach. So for all of my clients, before I meet with them in the pre-mediation session, I'll have a telephone call with them, gather very basic information, build that rapport with them, and then I'll send out the client questionnaire for them to complete. They can then do that client questionnaire in their own space and time. Whilst, yes, it might be, you could argue that completion of that manually might be helpful, the benefit of them doing it themselves is they can do that slowly, make sure they get all the information right about the relationship dates, the financials, the relevant contributions, not having to rush it in an initial conference. Yep. And then they put the information in correctly once into the system, and then we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So put it in once, and then it populates into a balance sheet, populates into chronology, populates into court documents, an application for consent orders. So there's that reduction in risk in us putting in the information that sometimes we're doing it by hand and then we're giving it to the PA to put into the system. It's triple handling, whereas the client does it. And yes, I always go through, when I have my pre-mediation conferences with the clients, I'll bring up the information and I'll confirm, okay, you've got 3 children, this is the relationship details, this is the financial details. So it's not like I don't go over that information, but the initial input is automated through the client, saving considerable time in that initial conference.
But it is a different way of practicing, isn't it? Because what you're describing is, I guess, what's being described in the media as an augmentation. I'm just going to call it an integration of digital and human labour in a way from the lawyer's point of view. And it's, it's just that seamless kind of integration of tech to people versus all this stuff operating in parallel, right?
Yes, and I think that's where the technology and the human labour, where it works together instead of the tech completely by itself replacing the lawyer or the humans without the technology. I think there needs to be, and I think that is the future. This, and I've got a slide coming up.
I know. I'm interrupting your slides.
The importance of, and I think this comes to the lawyer of the future as well, the importance of IQ, so the intelligence and what we've learned at law school and family law expertise, with the EQ, that importance of the humanity. And I know because of the intake that I've already done, I can spend more time on the emotional grief process, where they feel they're at, the level of conflict, how communication can be improved. I can bring in my social science. I've got a social science degree as well, that background into the conversation and help them emotionally as well as from a legal perspective. And lastly, the AI. I think the lawyers still to date are underestimating the power of the technology to automate the admin. And I think particularly the next generation of lawyers, I know we've got our team doing a careers fair at the moment, and there's a lot of law students really interested in the technology. And I know my children, they're more accustomed to chatbots and iPhones and iPads, etc., from the age of 2. And so they're native digitals as opposed to maybe even my generation. It is changing, and we really do need to get a grasp on how the IQ, EQ and AI work together.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the stats in family law in particular, I think we are now just at the point where the folks that potentially fall into the typical age bracket of folks that might divorce, a little depressing to say that, but, are in fact from that very generation. These are now folks that are very digitally savvy. And so it stands to reason if you're in practice catering to that group of clients, and I appreciate it's much broader than that, but they're going to be looking for different ways to resolve issues, definitely using technology and all of the above, which brings me to the next question that I want to ask you, and then I'll stop asking you questions and go back to slide. But I'm just thinking, if for the folks that are online with us today, and hello again, lovely to have you, and they're trying to think, okay, I've got my practice operating in a certain way, and I want to work out how to bring all these bits together. Is the starting point for them, Fiona, to kind of look at a matter and take the client journey from how do they come to you, how is this matter, whatever it might be, let's say it's a divorce, what are the parts to that, and what parts do I absolutely need to do, could technology do, and whatever? Is that the way to start all of this? Because I know you've been on that journey yourself.
And that leads me to the slide. My slide.
Hey!
Advice number 2. So understanding your client journey and the pain points in your practice. So I guess looking at what makes you happy and what makes you sad. What parts do you as a professional really enjoy doing, and what is really frustrating for you? If it's, gathering those documents, putting them in folders, that disclosure, is it intake, or is it all the calculations? I know a lot of lawyers get frustrated in having to do what's a 50-50, 55-60 on this asset pool versus this asset pool, whereas our system gets to auto-calculate everything and you can model different options. So you as a professional, what's your happy and sad points, but also the client experience. So what is really important to them? What could they do themselves versus what is important for you to be assisting them with as a professional. So to look at their journey and look at what points is it, and as I said, we do everything from intake to document collection, document disclosure, balance sheets, document drafting. And we provide that flexibility on how you use the tools within family property. And same with LawSwitch. We have the chatbots and you can tailor those to your needs. But as you said, I'm probably the generation, I know sadly a lot of my friends and colleagues around my age are separating, and they are looking at time and cost-effective ways to resolve their dispute in a more amicable way that's focused on the family as a whole. And that's where technology and the humanity side of things can come together. So that was that slide. And just on the other slide, just so that I make sure I'm using these slides, that IQ, that was the slide on the IQ plus EQ plus AI, and the lawyer of the future. So one of the other learnings I've had that I always valued when I worked in traditional practice, that mentorship within the firm, learning from one another, not just family law skills, but also business skills, client management, technology, etc. And I've really always been somebody who values learning and continuous learning. I think for those law students out there, it's not just when you get your law degree and that piece of paper, it definitely doesn't finish. It's a continuous journey. And I think that mentoring, I've started a group a couple of years ago. I started a couple of groups online. We've now got almost 500 family mediators and family dispute resolution practitioners, and that sharing of information confidentially, of course, online, sharing events, sharing technologies, etc., that can assist. That sharing of information, I think that's come a long way since I started Kirkman Family Law, and that's, I think, important to an advice I would pass on, to find your, I guess, your group or groups that you can connect in with and build each other up. Particularly in family law, it's a very stressful area of law. There's a lot of burnout. I know I've been through burnout myself. And it's really important that you're continuously improving, learning from each other, as well as within your firm. And there has been a significant, I've noticed with family property, a significant growth of sole practitioners working remotely. So even more important to connect in with others and share that knowledge.
Do you want to mention that group? Because I know that folks might want to jump into that, and I'm going to go back to advice number 2 in a sec, if you can just key that slide for me. But what's the name of the group that folks can join that you just mentioned?
The group online is the Family Mediators / FDRPs group. Okay. It's designed for family mediators in particular, although if you're a mediator in other areas, welcome to join. And it's focused on Australian family mediators, but it is quite an interactive group. I've also got one flexible family law group, which we started at the start of COVID, because we were noticing a lot of people wanted more information about remote work and how to do family law remotely, as far as online intakes, online disclosure, chatbots, document generation without secretaries being available 24/7, electronic signing, all of those things. So that group's really focused on that remote working in family law.
And what's the medium, Fiona, for those? Is it like Facebook? Facebook groups. Cool. And I guess some people think, oh, Facebook. I know for me, I wear 2 hats. I've got my personal Facebook page and I've got my professional Facebook page. And I know a lot of my colleagues are starting to do that as well. But just the settings, etc., quite good on Facebook. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn. I've got a number of LinkedIn pages, but these particular groups are on Facebook. Okay, fantastic. Can we jump back to advice number 2? Because I just wanted to have a look out. Cool. So, as we look at this, and the question that I want to ask you about this is really that this does represent, to my mind anyway, a change in how we would have traditionally thought about our businesses and practice as well, because I guess what we used to think about, or what we used to build our practices around, was very often what was convenient for us as lawyers, but particularly how the legal system operated or worked. But this is really quite different, because it's flipping it. I guess really it's, to use some of the terminology, client-centric versus lawyer-centric, and human design focused, versus not. How did you come to the point of knowing, because you were saying you came from a traditional practice, that you really had to think about this whole journey quite differently?
Good question. I think for me, it was, I guess, some personal frustrations with the system and how much money is involved in going to a full court hearing, and the time involved and the cost and the stress, not just on the clients, but also I was finding really stressful myself. And I think that was a combination of it being quite traditional practice. So the expectation is everything, handwritten notes for everything, as opposed to like Remarkables that I've got now. Everything was then typed up, full letters, and that reliance on sort of the secretary lawyer model. And I just felt it wasn't working for, and the stress involved in the litigation process, and the lack of use of technology, all of those sort of combined frustrations. Myself, I felt it wasn't working for me as a lawyer, and I felt it wasn't working for the clients. And I knew that there had to be a better way, a way that was focused more on dispute resolution and looking at the family as a whole, and what the interests of a family as a whole are, as well as the technology to use to do the admin, so that you're freed up from being burnt out and working these 16-hour days sometimes. So I really, when I left traditional practice, I probably spent, I think my CPD were right up that year, about 200 hours of CPD in that first year, learning a lot about psychology and the psychology of separation, collaborative practice. For those that don't know collaborative practice, it is a new model. It's been around for quite a while now, developed by Stuart Webb in the US, but is available in many countries around the world now, and it's getting prominence in Australia. It's a way of resolving matters through an interdisciplinary approach with lawyers, coaches, financial neutrals, child consultants, all coming together through a series of meetings to try to resolve the matter outside of court, instead of this war of correspondence and negotiations, which in my view, that was one of the big frustrations of this, letters going backwards and forwards to a point that somebody gave in, was just not that helpful. Whereas having a platform like Family Property to bring everything together, information and document sharing, and a focus on dispute resolution through mediation and collaborative practice, that's really helped, I guess, reinvent the way I do family law, and helped a lot of clients move more quickly to a resolution, which is obviously my vision, to help people amicably and efficiently resolve disputes.
But it's also kind of changed your role too, isn't it? I mean, yes, you're a legal advisor, but you're also a facilitator and a collaborator. In other words, it seems to me that what you're talking about is not just looking at this as a legal problem, but actually looking at it as in a broader perspective, something that needs to be resolved. But yes, lawyers are part of that, but there's also other folks that are a part of that. So a much more holistic kind of approach or focus, looking almost at the the whole problem and the whole person in a way, in terms of coming to the resolution. And that's very different too from how we would have looked at these things in a traditional legal practice.
Yes, and I think that's correct. In the past, when I worked in traditional practices, it was one shop, and we were assisting, I guess, in areas that we weren't properly trained in. I was doing a lot of family violence work, and I hadn't done any formal training in family violence. We were emotionally supporting our clients with sometimes limited support they were getting from counsellors and psychologists. We weren't getting the children's views. I've done some independent children's lawyer training, but it wasn't, that child-focused approach wasn't so prominent back then. And I think the financial neutral, we got advice from the tax about tax occasionally, but we didn't look at, perhaps a financial advisor being involved to look at financially modelling what are the best options: keep the house, sell the house, rent, etc., etc. So I've definitely, over the years, taken a more holistic, interdisciplinary approach. Not to say I'm not wearing the hat now of psychologist, financial provider, family violence, domestic violence caseworker, but having a better understanding, so doing training so I better understand it, but then also having a really good network that I can refer clients off to or bring in to my mediations and collaborative practice, so that we're all working together for the benefit of the family as a whole. Because it's not just what husband wants against what a wife wants, it's what is best for the children if it's a parenting arrangement, what's just and equitable, and looking at everything. It's such a hard time that they're going through, and I think that holistic approach, as opposed to a purist legal traditional approach, is really important.
And it's really interesting, isn't it, that the use of technology is really helping us to focus more on the human part of it in a way as well, right?
Yes, and it's interesting. We get some feedback that, our product is collaborative, and it's like, well, that's interesting. Technology and humanity, can a product be collaborative? But that was the aim. The product, I guess my legal experience and vision is to bring the parties together, to help them with the exchange of information and documents, and it is focused more on dispute resolution. That's not to say lawyers who are going through litigation can't use it. We've got the financial statement that can be automatically generated to help them go off to court, etc. But the way we've built the product with party A, party B, but a neutral balance sheet to look at, and it goes red and green if party A agrees, party B agrees. It goes green if there's issues in dispute. It goes red. It's really easy to focus them and, I guess, congratulate them on, these are the agreements you've reached and these are the issues in dispute. Let's look at automatically bringing up the documents that maybe compare the value of the house or the value of the car, etc. And we're also excited with the parenting component. We're building out more questions around screening and parenting, but also the central part of the parenting will be an interactive calendar, which again is not is going against the norm. It's normally all the writing of what the parenting arrangements are, but the central focus will be on an interactive calendar that then, of course, will populate a parenting plan and parenting orders. Whereas family property at the moment, the financial side, the heart of it is that interactive balance sheet, which surprises me sometimes because some lawyers don't really focus on that balance sheet. It's more around that proliferal issues, but it really brings the parties to the heart of what's the financial arrangements and settlement going to be, what's the parenting arrangements look like when we map it out on a calendar.
Yeah, but it's also focusing on what matters to the client.
And what matters to the client. And that visual aid as well. I think lawyers love to talk and we love to write, but I think attention spans, particularly writing, I was finding you would do these 10-page letters of advice in traditional practice, to not just give them information, but protect yourself. And that, whilst that is still important, I think clients don't really absorb that information as much as perhaps the generation before us, that they really prefer, I think, visually, visual aids, slides, or the interactive balance sheet, the calendar. And I know I use social media with videos and those sorts of things, that new mediums to communicate to clients, I think, is something that we've been looking at as well.
And probably one of the one of the positives, and I guess we're all looking for them in relation to COVID-19 as well, is that it's probably forced us to particularly focus on using different media for communication internally and externally, But I know that you've got another slide there about all the other cool technology that you use in your practice. Should we have a bit of a chat about that too? Sorry, I just
okay, I'll bring that up. Where are we? So we use quite a lot of tech in our practice.
That's why I thought it'd be cool to kind of have a little bit of a chat about it.
And it's interesting you say about COVID. We got very busy, not just with Kirkman Family Law, because sadly, with the pandemic and people living under the one roof, that separation did spike, but also the technology. We saw a lot of big clients come on board, the increasing use of technology because it was a necessity, and we've also brought on a lot of new staff, and we've had to work remotely. So we use a lot of platforms. I'm sure you're familiar with many of these. Zoom as one. I don't think I need to mention Zoom, although sometimes I do for some practitioners. I'm surprised after a year people don't know Zoom, but most of you video conferencing Zoom, and Teams. Teams is being used by the family law courts as their primary video technology. So if you're a family lawyer, you should be familiar, hopefully, with Microsoft Teams. We also have a integration with a Mediation. They're an online dispute resolution platform that is, again, focused on video conferencing, but specifically designed for mediation. So it has a number of other expert tools within a mediation and case management, booking, payments, etc. So if you haven't checked that out, they've also got an expert panel. I then, in the family mediation, I use Family Law Doors, which is an online screening assessment. And it's very good in that they complete the questionnaire and then I get the answers and then it prompts me on the questions to ask them. So that's been quite helpful, as well as there is a few, this is one I use because it's free, but Up to Parents, an online post-separation parenting course. So again, the importance of, and again, that might be moving away from traditional to new law, is providing resources that will help the clients move through separation, not just written materials, but videos, courses, other things that can help. I'll come back to Zapier. MailerLite, so we've used a few different mailing systems, but that's really helpful in speaking to our clients and leads. Google Meet, Google suite of information. Again, in traditional practice, everything was Outlook and Microsoft. And then I was awakened to Google Suite, and I'm like, wow, this is so much better. So I use the Gmail and the Google Docs a lot from my phone. I probably work 2 hours each morning on my phone. Asana. So for project management, again, there's a number of them. Monday's another one, but Asana is one we use. HubSpot to keep those leads. Again, there's a free version, but the client relationship management system. Slack. I love Slack, but it keeps beeping at me all the time from my team. But that communication platform and sharing of information between your team. And Stripe. Stripe's been awesome in getting payments, both now in Kirkman Family Law and LawSwitch and FamilyProperty. We take automated payments through Stripe, and they send out automated emails to you as well as to the clients. And of course, LawSwitch and FamilyProperty, which I've talked about. And Zapier, if you haven't heard of Zapier, it's great. It's basically is the glue of the internet. It zaps things together. So you can connect, family property and LawSwitch to your practice management system, which I haven't mentioned here because I use a few at the moment. We do have an integration with Smokeball. I've used Action Step, Matero, etc. But there's a number of them out there. But with Zapier, the good thing is you don't need an all-in-one system. You can connect Stripe with LawSwitch. You can connect HubSpot with Slack, etc. So everything can be connected through Zapier. It would be interesting to know from the participants who's used some of these technologies as well. But I think there's a question there.
It was a chat. So, but folks, do throw into the chat whether you're familiar with any of these or whether you've got any other questions for Fiona with those. So into chat, just throw in, which one of these you've been using, and we'll have a quick look at that, and everyone can kind of have a look at it as well. While you're doing that, I should kind of mention that a Mediation, we run a thing called Legal Techie Tuesday and have been for quite some time now. And a Mediation did a demo for us. So if you go to the Centre for Legal Innovation website and look under events, you'll find the table there. It's available for you 24/7 and free. So do jump in and kind of have a look at that. So I see you've brought up lessons learned. So what'd you learn?
A lot. It's an ongoing journey. I think I'm somebody who likes to wear a lot of hats and likes to take on new challenges. But with that, I'd probably say yes to too many things. So I've learned the importance of saying no, to try and look at what are your priorities and why. And I think that's important, particularly as you start to grow, get busier. There is that movement between getting clients to love your products and love your services, and then becoming more profitable, and how much, I guess, free work should you do versus how much paid work. I do speak at a number of events and I love doing it, but I found I was doing probably too many. And so what to say no to is, I think, an ongoing lesson for me, as my personality shows, because that can have an impact on you personally. I've had myself some major health issues over the last 5 years, in ICU, in hospital for four times over the last 3 years. So it's really important to be looking after yourself, and that comes back to saying no. The second thing is, don't grow too quickly. I think sometimes, and I've learned, I've had a number of staff with Kirkman Family Law, mediators, lawyers, staff, same with family property. I've had a number of staff, and I think sometimes you need to get those structures and systems in place. And I know for me, managing a team does take time, and you've got to recognise, particularly when they're starting out, that you'll need time to teach them how to use the technology and your practices and procedures. So I've learned a little and had to scale back and then increase and scale back, and learnt from that. And then change management. I think one of the biggest hurdles in doing law differently and using technology and innovating is that it requires change. It requires you to get in the sandbox and do something differently. And I think as lawyers, our personality is perfectionism, and we want to be great at everything. And so it does take some time to recognise that it will take time to adapt new technology. we're finding now when we're getting our clients on board, we try and have a champion within the firm who will be, I guess, the super user within the firm. And that's been, and then an implementation plan, proper training, follow-up training, ongoing support. And I guess we've learnt that over time. At the beginning, we're like, oh, this is a self-service, do it yourself, you can go off and use it. But I think the nature of lawyers is we do need that hand-holding and change management until we get to a point where we can feel confident in using the new technologies, etc. So having strategies in place to overcome that challenge, I think, is really important. And I always liked your slide, Terri, that I think when you're looking at adopting technology or innovation, this comes from Terri, but to have a great idea and then experiment and launch and then continue to measure the success of that product or service and then continually reiterating. And we're with LawSwitch and Family Property, we take a really client-centric, client-focused approach to our roadmap. We don't have these like, oh, in 6 months we'll launch that, etc. I'm like, Tim, we need to launch this today. Is overnight coding to launch it. But that's not everything. I can't promise that. But we do take that reiterating, enhancing, and where the product was, if you looked at it 2 years ago compared to where it is today, we've come so far from a product perspective, but also I know from a business perspective, I've learned a lot. It's very different from a family lawyer, sole practitioner running your own firm to a CEO of a growing legal tech startup. We've had the assistance, as we said, of Centre for Legal Innovation. We were also in the Lander and Rogers Law Tech Hub, who I know is in collaboration with Centre for Legal Innovation. So they've been really helpful, but it's been a really big learning curve, which I love learning, but it's definitely, been a challenge, the joys and challenges of running multiple businesses. So.
And I think, look, there's another 2 great pieces of advice there as well. I think, Fiona, in that, if there's one thing that's consistently underestimated, that I hear all the time, it is that change management piece. And so just great advice, and want to underscore that. And I think, the other thing that you've pointed to there as well, which is so important, is that the nature of our industry and every industry now is that we're in a state of continuous improvement, and we need the agility and the tools to be able to kind of to take that forward. Which leads me to one of the questions that we've got here, which is that great diagram that you showed us with all of the tech that you use in your practice. The question is, how do you manage the overlap? Because in some of those, there are obviously similar functionalities, not all of them, but in some of them. So how do you choose which functionality and which product, I guess, and what's your favourite?
I think, we've experimented. Tim's always on top of like, what's the latest technology? What should we be using? And I find sometimes you can get a bit overwhelmed because you're using too much. I think you need to probably look at what's your focus one, and then how do you bring the other, what are you missing, and how can you, I guess, zap that functionality in. So we were using, for example, Asana and Slack, and HubSpot and Google. It was getting a bit overwhelming. So the focus for our team is Slack, and then we bring those other technologies into that. So I think it's really starting to understand and what works for your firm. And again, coming back to that, what's the idea? What's the pain points that we're trying to solve? Let's experiment, see what works. And then let's reiterate and let's sort of experiment on, okay, well, Asana might be working well for this, but Slack's working for this, and how do we bring them together?
I think like some of the platforms are kind of expanding their offerings as well, right? So like the Office 365 suite, now. You know, there's so much stuff within that. So, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, as you say, choose your main one, but also look at the functionality that it offers, because there might be a whole bunch of functionality that you haven't explored that you're paying for, but you haven't actually used, right? So folks probably got just enough time maybe for another question if you have one. So throw it into Q&A or throw it into chat, whatever works best for you. Fiona, while folks are doing that, you know, what do you want them to take away from this? What of all of the lessons that you've learned? And I'm thinking, I'm going to ask you to put on your kind of business hat here in particular. You know, what are your words of advice about folks who really want to practice differently, who want to emulate in many respects the journey that you've taken?
Good question. I think it's important to look at what you've been doing and what are the pain points for you and possibly your clients of what you've been doing before you launch into anything. So what's the pain point or the problem that you're personally or from a client or business perspective trying to solve? That's number one.
Yeah.
Then the question is, how are you going to solve that? And I think I've learned a lot in developing legal tech, that identifying the pain point, having an idea. So Professor Parkinson came to us with the idea for family property. You then need to, and then we built on that idea, understood how it could solve pain points. Then you need to build a response to that pain point, whether it's a product or a service that responds to that pain point. And that's a whole journey in itself. There might be technologies that are out there that can fill some of that gap. There might be things that you need to develop, and you might need to get developers on board or others, services, and do some training, etc. But look at how you can develop a solution, get that solution to the problem.
Yeah.
As number two. But then thirdly, and I think this gets missed a lot, you then need to market and sell that new product or service, the new way that you're doing things differently. And that's where the change management, I think, is underestimated. The change management for you personally as the person bringing about that change. And obviously I'm in the innovators hat. Then there's the early adopters. Then there's a bit of a chasm between that and the majority. And then there's the laggards. But that change management, how are you going to market and sell that new product and service? And again, we've learned a lot, and there's been challenges around that in how to get that adoption of our product, how to get that adoption of collaborative practice, of mediation. And it is a challenge. So recognizing that and then looking at strategies, I think, on that change management so that you can make a profit from it, for example, and enjoy what you do and that it will be successful. So those are the three things. The idea, the pain points, the idea, the solution, and then the change management to implement and successfully bring about that change within your organisation.
Fantastic. And, you know, I would underscore and just add two bits to that, and that is to remember, and I know this is close to your heart, that great ideas come from everywhere.
Yes, definitely.
And I guess and maybe this signals also just a slightly different way of looking at these things, but the resolution of those pain points can be done collaboratively with your clients as well. You don't have to do them all by yourself. And in fact, in many respects, it's great to do that stuff together. You know, reluctantly, I have to say that we've come to the end of our session. Fantastic session, just brilliant. It's always great to be able to hang out with you, Fiona, and you know, this has been no exception. So thank you very much. And thank you, everyone who's attended as well. It's just been a delight to have you back in this series. This and lots of other stuff, and we've spoken about a few of them, obviously, you will find if you follow us, the Centre for Legal Innovation, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And this session today will be available as a video, and it will also be available as a podcast. So you can watch it or re-listen to it, as the case may be. Fiona's kind of thrown up here a slide for you to be able to contact her on. Please do. I know that you are incredibly generous with your time, Fiona, and how passionate you are about this space. So I know that you'll welcome anyone reaching out to you. And as I say, please do. And have a look at these fabulous products that have been developed as well. So on that note and parting, I have to say again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you very much, Fiona. Just a pleasure to have you. And yeah, we'll see everyone again next time.
Thank you, Terri. Thank you, Christine.
Most welcome.
Cheers.
Bye now.